For this lesson, you need to open the sample file, The World's Fastest Cars 4, from your Sample Files folder. In this lesson, we'll cut, copy and paste the contents of cells using a technique called drag and drop. To begin with, I'd like to move the Ferrari and Pagani from rows 19 and 20 back to rows 11 and 12. So I'll select the cells I want to move, that's cells A19 to G20, and then hover the mouse cursor over the border of the cells. You should now see a four-headed arrow cursor shape. Now, almost every viewer of this video will see the four-headed arrow, but a very small number of viewers may not. That's because somebody may have switched drag and drop off on your computer. If you suspect this is the case, click File on the ribbon, then Options on the left-hand menu, and then Advanced in the left-hand menu bar. And notice that in the Editing Options group, there's an option that says Enable Fill Handle and Cell Drag and Drop. You need to make sure that this checkbox is checked. If it's unchecked, click it to check it, and then click the OK button. So we now have the range A19 to G20 selected, and when I hover the mouse cursor over the border of the selected range, you can see that I have the four-headed arrow cursor shape. Now I can drag and drop these cells into rows 11 and 12. So I hold down the left mouse button and then start to move the mouse. And as I move the mouse, you can see that a marquee's appeared, showing me where the cells will be copied to. Well, I want them to go into these cells in rows 11 and 12. So I release the mouse button, and the values in rows 19 and 20 have been moved to row 11 and 12. But I really did want to keep the Ferrari and Pagani in rows 19 and 20. So I'd like now to copy rather than move the same range back into rows 19 and 20. To do that, I once again hover on the border of the selected range until I see the four-headed arrow cursor shape, and I'm going to drag and drop again, but this time I'm going to use the right mouse button rather than the left button. So I hold down the right mouse button and drag the marquee down to rows 19 and 20. When I release the mouse button, something interesting happens. A pop-up menu appears offering two options, Move here and Copy here. Well, this time I want to copy rather than move, so I select Copy here, and when I click, the contents of rows 11 and 12 have now been copied to rows 19 and 20. There's only one Italian car left now in the top range. That's the Ferrari 599 GTB. So I need to copy row 15 into row 22. I'm going to do that using yet another drag and drop technique. First of all, I'll select all of the cells in row 15. Now I'll hold down the Ctrl key on the keyboard and hover the mouse cursor over the border of the selected range. And you can see that I now have a different cursor shape. Instead of the four-headed arrow, I have a mouse pointer and a small plus icon. When you see the plus icon, you know that you're going to copy the range rather than move it. So I'll hold down the left mouse button, I'll move the marquee down to row 22, still holding down the Ctrl key, and then I'll release the mouse button. And you can see that this is a very efficient method for copying cells using drag and drop. Now I'd like to rename Sheet 1 and Sheet 2 so that they read World Cars and Italian Cars. You learned how to do this in Lesson 3.1. So I'll double-click on the Sheet 1 worksheet tab and name this sheet World Cars. Then I'll double-click on the Sheet 2 worksheet tab and rename this tab Italian Cars. Then I'll click back onto the World Cars tab. I'd now like to move the Italian cars section, that's cells A17 to G22, onto the Italian cars worksheet. So to do that, I'll first select the range A17 to G22, then I'll right-click inside the selected range and select Cut from the shortcut menu. I'll then click on the Italian Cars Worksheet tab and then right-click in cell A1 and select Paste from the shortcut menu. And when I click, the cells are moved to their new location. There's a few things wrong with the Italian Cars worksheet. First of all, there's no column headers. What do I mean by column headers? Well, if I go back to the World Cars worksheet, you can see that in row 3 I have make, model, top speed, 0 to 60, BHP, price and country. This tells me what the data in the rows beneath relates to. I'd like to have the same column headers on my Italian Cars worksheet. So I'll select all of row 3 by clicking on the row header. Then I'll right-click inside the selected cells, click Copy from the shortcut menu, then click on the Italian Cars worksheet. Now you might think that I'll need to insert a row above row 3 to place the copied column headers into, but Excel can do this for me automatically. I'll select all of row 3 by clicking the row 3 header, then right-click and select Insert Copied Cells from the shortcut menu. I'll click now, and you can see that Excel actually did two things. It inserted a new row for me, and it's pasted the column headers into the row. Well, there's only one thing wrong with this worksheet now, and that is that the columns are not quite wide enough to display their contents. So we'll use the technique you learned in lesson 2.9 to resize the columns. To do that, I'll select cells A3 to G7, then on the Home tab on the ribbon, in the Cells group, I'll click the Format drop-down and click Autofit Column Width. And when I click, all of the columns are perfectly sized so that they can display their contents. All that remains now is to save your work, and I'm going to save with the new name, The World's Fastest Cars 5. And as usual, I'll save into the folder above my sample files folder. I click the Save button, and you've now completed lesson 3.4. Cut, copy and paste using drag and drop.